Yes, hello. We only have 50 minutes, so I can't really explain too much about the protocol itself, what it does. I'm going to focus on how you can actually start setting it up and using it. If you do want to know more about the protocol itself, like Vitaly said, we have this nice series of articles on Smashing Magazine, free for you all to read. But so if you want to use this yourself, of course, you're going to first need a server to set up HTTP3. And what you typically like is something that you know, like Apache or Node.js or maybe Nginx, for example, to start serving it. The sad thing is that none of these actually have full HTTP3 support yet for various practical reasons. Luckily, there are a couple of other servers that do. The one I would recommend personally is called H2O, which is a very high performant H3 server, and that also does very well for HTTP2. HTTP2, by the way. Um, Another alternative is the Caddy server, which also has had H3 support for quite some time now, so it's quite mature. But the thing I would recommend, at least for now, is not running it yourself, but instead using a existing content delivery network, a CDN, to do this for you. The two I would recommend right now are Cloudflare, who have a very mature offering, who were involved with HTTP3 from the start. It's also very easy to set up and use. And then you also have Fastly, who actually stole the original HTTP3 developers from Google, and they are now working at, or at least some of them are working at Fastly. So also a very, very good um, implementation there. So those are, I think, the main options you have right now to try and set up your own HTTP3 server and then actually use it for your content. So once you have that server, that should be doable. Then of course we also need a client to actually load your web pages on that. And there's the news is a bit better. Unlike the servers, most of the mainstream browsers actually have quite good HTTP3 support at the moment. The only one that is lagging behind a little bit is Safari, which is a bit ironic because they were actually the first to add experimental support about 2.5 years ago. So in Safari it works, but you still need to manually enable it using a preference. But we expect that to be gone by the next version, basically. So that's all good. Let's say you have set up an HTTP3 server and you have a website, and let's see what it looks like if you try to navigate to there using a browser, right? So I'm using Google Chrome right now, and I'm going to go to the Cloudflare homepage because, as I said, they support HTTP3. And to see which protocol is actually being used, I'm using the Chrome DevTools here below, using the network tab here. So let's try that out. Let's go to cloudflare.com. And then here, I currently don't have it disabled, but if you didn't know, you can right click here and there is just a column you can enable that is called protocol. And if you click on that, you will actually see, as we see here, the actual protocol that is being used for loading the page. And I'm just gonna cheat and make sure it's reloading. Of course, it's not working properly. The thing I wanted to show here is that I just loaded cloudflare.com, but it is actually loading it not over HTTP3, but over HTTP2. So here in the column, in the protocol column, I'm trying to zoom, it's not working. Here in the protocol column, you can see it says H2, meaning it's HTTP2. And that's a little bit unexpected because, as I said, Cloudflare enables HTTP3. So what's happening? Well, this is actually perfectly normal. Because of several very technical reasons, browsers are not going to be using HTTP3 when they are visiting a web page for the very first time. This is mainly because it might be that the network blocks HTTP3 or your server simply does not support H3 yet. That is quite common these days still. So what the browser actually does is says, okay, I first need to be sure that you support the new protocol before I'm going to start using it. And it does that using a two-step discovery process, basically. And this, at least the first thing that we see here, is the first step in that discovery process, in that the browser simply establish an HTTP2 or HTTP1 connection to the server, which is relatively sure that will work because that is what you typically use, right? And then what the server does, if the server supports HTTP3, it's going to send back a special response header. And this header, now I can do, fantastic. This header is called alt SVC, as you can see, and it stands for Alternative Services, which is a feature that, among other things, allows you to indicate that this current service, the current web page, your content, is also available on via different means. In this case, of course, via a different protocol. So what this means is this current page is also available via HTTP3, which is shortened to H3, on UDP protocol port 443. This is the same port that is used for doing HTTP2 and HTTP1, or at least HTTPS, so the secure version of the protocols. It doesn't need to be. You can pretty much choose any port you like in practice. Most servers will still use 443. And then the MA stands for max age, meaning that this is valid for about 1 day. So Cloudflare is saying for the next day, we will keep HTTP3 on. You can keep on using HTTP3 with our services. What you also see is H3 29, 28, 27. Those are older versions of HTTP3 that are slowly being phased out, but are now currently still being supported. But so let's say in about half a year or a year, it's expected you would only see H3 in this list, right? So basically, the server explicitly tells the browser, I also do HTTP3, and you can do it in this way. Contact me on this port. And what the browser is then going to do from the next connection onward, the next page load onward, then it is going to start using HTTP3. So let's try that. Let's just reload the page. And if I now scroll up, there we go. Now we see that I did have H3 properly for my first request as well. So now the browser knows via alternative services header, we can use HTTP3 with this server. And the browser is going to store this in kind of an alt SVC cache. So it's a special cache that the browser keeps to keep track of which sites support it. And that's one of the things I wanted to mention, and that also did just now. It's not really the normal cache. And this means it's not really apparently influenced by this toggle. So normally, if you use this tool, you would use disable cache to make sure that you get a fresh view of all these things constantly. But so disabling cache doesn't actually disable the alternative services cache, which is good for normal testing. But sometimes you want to make sure that you do this whole alternative services thing from scratch to make sure it's actually working. So one thing I found that works is if you right click here on the left top on the reload icon, if you right click on that, you have an option to do empty cache and hard reload. And apparently that empties not just the page cache, but also the alternative services cache. And that actually works. And if I click on this now, we should fall back to HTTP2 here on top, right? I know it says here HTTP3 on the bottom. We'll get to that in a second. That was not supposed to happen yet, but I'll get to that. Okay. So this is in the browser if you want to manually check. But of course, if you're doing web performance work, you will typically not use this browser manually all that much. What you will use instead is tools like, of course, the amazing web page test, which allows you to get a lot more information, a lot more different devices and networks. Great tool. If you're not using it yet, please start doing so. And so what I did is load, again, the Cloudflare homepage using web page test. A simple setup. I loaded first once without any indication of HTTP3, and then a second time in the hopes that, again, the second time around should be HTTP3 as I just explained. And so if we click on the first one, we'll see here we have the different resources. If I click on this, you'll see here immediately protocol HTTP2. Like I said, that's the first step of the two-step process. It will load using HTTP2. And then all the other resources here, again, HTTP2, 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 until I think we get, this one was about number 16. And suddenly for request 16, it's no longer HTTP2, it's suddenly H3, right? 15, was still HTTP2, and 16 suddenly HTTP3, right? What this means is that Chrome doesn't really wait for a next full page load to try and start using HTTP3. The moment it gets the alternative services indication in, it's going to immediately try to open an H3 connection to the server. If that connection is successful, it works, then it will start using this connection as soon as possible. So what we see here basically is here, it will get the alternative services. This is probably the handshake time for the H3 connection. And here, as soon as possible, it starts using it for all the subsequent resources. This is what we also saw in the previous tab, but there it apparently happened much, much sooner, right? Here, I don't even get time to get any HTTP2 requests in. It immediately switches to HTTP3, probably because I have a lot less latency than I did in the test that I did here, right? And so we see that we can get both H2 and H3 in the same page load already with Chrome. The thing is with the only thing I currently find missing in web page test for that is that it's a bit unclear how the HTTP3 connection is actually being established. For example, here, this is the HTTP3 connection, but it doesn't actually say this. And a lot of stuff is missing, right? You don't see, for example, the TLS negotiation, which also happens, or the connection duration. You don't actually yet see this in the web page test visualization. This will probably be added sometime in the near future, but it's something to keep in mind as you're trying to test this, because it might not be obvious where you can find the needed information. So we see that the first page load already uses HTTP3. Now let's check what happens from the second page load on. So the alternative services cache is primed, it's ready. It should be using HTTP3, right? But what we actually see when we click on this, we see that Chrome, at least on web page tests, still uses HTTP2 at the beginning. Second, still uses HTTP2. It's only here, I think, about the sixth request that actually switches to using HTTP3. This is something I find quite strange, because when testing this manually with Chrome, it does it properly. It just switches to H3 as you would expect. So this is kind of weird. I don't yet know where this is coming from. It might be a web page test bug. It might be a Chrome bug. It might be intended behavior depending on Chrome's implementation. That's unclear yet. Especially, I did some other tests. For example, I have here a Firefox test on Facebook, which also has H3 enabled by default. And there, Firefox does use HTTP3 immediately from the very first request on. So what this basically means is that everything is still very unclear. Tool support is not 100% yet. So if you're trying to evaluate, especially HTTP3 performance compared to HTTP2, you're going to have to be very, very careful, because your first page load is not going to be full H2. It might be H2 and H3 combined. So it's kind of merging the two. And even the second page load, depending on what it does, might not even be H3 all the way either, right? So my recommendation is to wait a couple of months until the tools catch up with these new protocols to make sure that everything works as you would expect, right? Now I'm running out of time. The final thing I wanted to show you, and it is another tool that a lot of people use, which is a bit more to automate things, or a bit faster to check things, which is of course curl, right? The command line utility. Curl also has pretty good HTTP3 support. The only downside is that it's still, you need to enable it at build time. So you need to actually build a custom copy of curl from source to be able to use it, right? And I don't really like that. I don't want to do all of this on my local machine for curl. So I went looking for someone who did this for me. There are several Docker containers, for example, that actually have done this. And I pretty much like this one, which I could find, which I installed. And so I'm going to run it now with so this, I'm just going to start a Docker container which has the HTTP3 version of curl built in. There we go. And if I now do curl and it's just the HTTP3 flag, and I go to cloudflare.com again, right? And I'm just going to show the headers. The -I just shows me the headers. They will see that I actually go to the Cloudflare server using HTTP3 immediately. So using the HTTP3 flag, I can bypass the whole two-step discovery process, and I just force it to use HTTP3 immediately. If I don't want to do that, I do want to use the discovery process, then you need to use, again, alternative services. So curl also has support for that. You need to indicate a hash file that you want to store it. This can be named anything. It's just a file. Now we can go to cloudflare.com. Now you see I omitted the HTTP3 flag. So the first time I do this, it's just going to use HTTP1 as you would expect, but it's going to have the alternative services header as we saw before. Then if I look at what's in this file, very simply, it's just text. It says, okay, Cloudflare is available at H329 on this port. And so now if I repeat the same command, it will use the alternative services cache, much like what Chrome was doing, to actually load a Cloudflare over HTTP3 again, right? So the Cloudflare, you can both force HTTP3 from the start if you're doing something automated, or you can use you can simulate this whole discovery process using alternative services cache as well. And the final thing I wanted to show you is that if you try to do this for our favorite website, Smashing Magazine, and I of course need to put in the -I, then we will see that Smashing actually doesn't send us this alternative services header yet. And so if I would try to force this using HTTP3, Perl will actually hang because it tries to contact Smashing Magazine, cannot. If we add verbose logging, we can see this. We try to open a quick socket using HTTP3, cannot find it, will abort after some time. So that would be my message to you, Vitali and the team. Please make sure HTTP3 is enabled on Smashing Magazine as well, so you can enjoy all the new features. And that's all from me. Enjoy the break, and see you soon. Thanks.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Robin. Now I know what I need to do. I just need to make sure that we actually have HTTP3 enabled on our servers, if it's actually even available. But this is useful to know. All right, Robin, thank you so much for the session, giving us a little bit of a glimpse of the future, and also where, not necessarily the future, the present, actually. I hope that we will be seeing HTTP3 being rolled out and used all across the board. And we will talk, I'm sure, in the chat later about why do we need HTTP3 so quickly after HTTP2. That's a separate conversation for later. All right, thank you so much, Robin. And everyone, please give a round of warm. Any emoji you prefer, Robin? No, that's
a rhino. I love rhinos.
Okay, here we go. An emoji or rhino emoji would be appropriate. Thank you so much, Robin. See you in a bit.